Hi everybody, welcome back to La La Land, and today I am doing a book review for one of my favorite books, 100 Cupboards. So this book is the very first book that ever really got me into reading. I had a lot of trouble reading due to my dyslexia, and I just simply would not read. I picked this up once on a car trip, and I absolutely loved it. It was so much fun. It was like the first book that I ever really got into. I would read it at night when I wasn't supposed to. And so it really got me into reading. And so a few days ago, I had to go somewhere and I was going to be there for a long time. I thought, why not bring a book? I grabbed the first book off my shelf that I was like, this looks good, and it was this. I wanted to try rereading it, and oh my goodness, it was still just so good. I read this book so fast, and I have a very hard time reading, much less reading fast, so I was surprised at how fast I could read this book. I think there's just so much about it that's so great, and one of those things is the plot. It's so good. So the plot of this book, it was interesting for me to read it again because the first time I read this book, I was so just absolutely gripped by it. It really, really hooks you. But when I was really reading it again, I realized that not a ton happens in this book. It's a very interesting structure because there are quite a few slower parts that necessarily saying they don't really drag you down. They're still very interesting and you still enjoy them a lot, but it's not all action, surviving. It's much more about the discovery of the cupboards, which was an interesting choice just because the climax of this book, it was so gripping, and yet it wasn't that it was one of those climaxes that just totally just goes out.
It was like, oh, climax, now we're over.
It was much more, I want to say that N.D.Wilson was pacing his books very well. Often, sometimes, authors, they'll have this huge event, and then every other book it's like,
oh, we're surviving, we're saving ourselves, now we're saving the world, and now we have to save the universe.
It just gets too big. And I think N.D.Wilson did a very good job of pacing his stories where this climax was still very gripping, very interesting, very exciting, but it wasn't this sort of climax that we're used to, and I really enjoyed that. The second thing that I thought was done so well were the characters, and I thought Henry was a very interesting main character, and I really liked that, since this is sort of like the whole city boy coming to the country, he was much more of a sheltered kid, and I really enjoyed how he wasn't just either all spunky or just all naive of everything. He was an interesting person who actually thought out his actions, which I feel like in books a lot of the time people just don't think, and that's one of the things that's so annoying in books. And Henry, he would really think things through, and just, he felt so real. Like, I remember there was this time when he wanted to stay in Kansas. He enjoyed Kansas so much, but then he felt awful because it meant that his family had to still be kidnapped for him to stay there, and it made him feel guilty. And that's such a real feeling. Sometimes we as people, we want things, but it means the price of someone else, and he was really thinking, he's like, I'm a horrible person for wanting to stay in Kansas because it means that my parents are still kidnapped. And he felt so real to me. And I really appreciated that the author didn't just make him some
sheltered kid coming to the country not knowing anything, or some spunky city boy coming to the country and totally like not knowing how to do anything.
The other reason, one of the reasons that I said earlier, how I don't always like how they have characters who just don't think and they just do stuff, and Henrietta was kind of like that. Henrietta was honestly kind of annoying at times. I think we can all agree she was a little annoying at times, but honestly she was like, I can't remember how old, are they 11? I don't know, but honestly that's how I probably was like Henrietta when I was 11 years old. I didn't listen to a lot of people. I wanted adventure so badly, and I wanted to prove myself, and Henrietta, she just so much wants to prove that she can do this and she can do that, and she's the one who puts these thoughts in Henry's head that the cupboards are magic, you know. He's like,
maybe there's a pen and some socks in these cupboards that I discovered in my wall.
And so you can really see just how, almost just like how little Henry really thinks about this, and Henrietta's just like, we have to open these. I would honestly probably be Henrietta in this situation. I think we would all probably be Henrietta in this situation. And so while she could be so annoying at times and we were with Henry just frustrated at her, it was also, we needed her to push Henry to be able to do the things he needed to do. He never would have gotten in the cupboards. The witch never would have gotten out. And so while Henrietta was at sometimes just like,
why listen to Henry?
It made sense because I feel like a lot of people, especially when you're 11 years old, would probably be with Henrietta in that situation. And the next thing I thought the author did very well was, I really enjoyed Henry and Frank's relationship. It was, their relation kind of took parts of the chapter that weren't as, like, the cupboards and how to get inside the cupboards. They were kind of considered more of the slower parts, but they were still very interesting, and I enjoyed that. They weren't like,
oh, but in this chapter, nothing's happening.
it was still very interesting, and I still very much wanted to read it. I didn't suddenly stop wanting to read this book, and I thought that their relationship was so...
So, it just, at the end, you enjoy it so much that there are these two lost souls who aren't supposed to be in this world, and they cling to each other. Not really cling, but you know what I mean. They have each other, because no one else in this world, they don't belong to this world, so they choose to attach themselves. How do I phrase this?
Neither one of them belongs to this world, and so they kind of form this friendship between not belonging here, and even when Henry doesn't know it, and it's such a sweet thing. And knowing that Frank and Dottie, they wanted Henry and they wanted to adopt him, you can really see it in the way Frank, you know, he probably knows just how sheltered this kid is, and he just wants to let him live a little, and I thought that was really well done, and I thought that the author did a good job with that. The next thing that this book actually, I didn't see the first time I read this, was foreshadowing, and he did such a good job foreshadowing the next 3 books, and I was so surprised at that, because while I was rereading this, I found so many hints and clues that I just loved, and I was like,
Oh my goodness.
such as the letters. When Henry was receiving all these letters, I was so excited, and I thought it was so cool that even like here it's already setting up things we'll see further in the next books, and I enjoy that so much. You also got a setup for Frank and Frank's backstory, which I thought was hinted at beautifully. It was, and it was so subtle here and there. And then when I pronounce the name Nimenheim, I know that's incorrect, but it's how I pronounce it. When she's like talking to Frank, she kind of like says it, but you kind of pass it off as, oh, Dottie and Frank were, went through the cupboards maybe because they knew about them. And then you get this backstory that he was actually from one of these other worlds, and he was also a victim of Henrietta's grandfather making these cupboards and then being like,
Sorry, can't go back.
And I thought that was, like, that explains so much about Frank, and I really enjoyed the parts that were from Frank's perspective because he was such a quiet person, but he knew so much. Like, he knew Henry was messy with the cupboards, and he was just like, let him do it, like, let him go find home, I think part of it was he never got to go home. He never got to find his family, and he hoped that Henry would be able to find his, possibly. And one thing about Henry and Frank that just, I just was like laughing, like that would never happen, was when Henry found out he was adopted. Like, the scene is just Frank sitting on his bed and Henry's like,
Am I adopted? And Frank's like, yeah. And Henry's just like, okay.
like, I don't know about you, but if I found out I was adopted, I'd be a little more like,
What? How? When?
and just, they were so comfortable around each other. Yeah, like Henry would, try not to wake him up. He was sneaking around everybody, but he just felt comfortable around Frank. And I thought that that was really just a nice thing in this book. Also, there were a lot of hints to Henry's family, especially his father, which it's so, they're not really subtle, like they say it like 1,000 times. They're like,
Son of Mordecai.
and so it wasn't that subtle, but it was just showing up how N.D.Wilson already knew who Henry was, and we wanted to know with him, but we couldn't because he didn't tell us in this book. But it is worth it when you find out. And so, they set up Henry's sort of powers, I want to say. Like, not powers. They set up that he's special. And I say that word very, that way for a reason. But, they set up how he's very different. And they set up so many, I keep saying they, I'm sorry. He set up so many future events that take place in books, and you can see how the actions that were made, even the small ones, lead to larger events, and I thought that was so interesting, and it was just so good. They set up characters, they set up he sets up characters, he sets up future events, he sets up so many things in this book, but it's not just a set up the story sort of book. It is still a story. It just has been expertly intertwined with so many little details and some more obvious, not really details, some obvious hints of future events. And one of the things he does also very well is his world building. And here's the thing, in this book, you don't see it a lot. And I'm going to explain why for a minute. So in this 100 Cupboards book, it's kind of like it's giving you all the worlds, sort of, in a way, by having you see these cupboards. It's giving you tons of worlds. But when it comes to world building, it's almost as if N.D.Wilson, he is giving you sort of the skeleton of the world building, and as the story progresses, it just grows and grows and grows until you're totally immersed into this story. And I think that was really well. Like, this first book, it's mostly set in Kansas, and even when they do go to other worlds, like, oh, I'm blanking out, let me quick find it. Okay, I don't know what world it is, but it's the one with the whole ruined place with all the ghosts, sort of, not ghosts, you know what I mean. Place where Henrietta gets stuck, Henry has to go find her. Even that, it was a very small detail, it wasn't like something super important, but it just gave you such a feeling of time in this place, and it felt real.
Like you were walking through some, like, you felt like you were in some disheveled Greek destroyed ruins or something. You could really feel how much time was in this place.
N.D.Wilson just continues to grow on his world building, whether it's places or whether it's how he describes them or makes them. He just does an excellent job, and each one feels lived into. Richard's different UK Britain place with Queen, like, Avina or something, I don't know, to the Barden Hill. I loved Barden Hill. I'm gonna say that right now. I wanted to be at Barden Hill. I was like, I could actually smell the grass and the trees, and I thought that was exceptional. And one thing that you find will also grow in N.D.Wilson's book is his magic. And the magic and the worlds are kind of intertwined.
Hence magic cupboards that lead to different worlds.
But it was just interesting how it takes many different forms. Some were like the different grains of the wood that were kind of just like mentioned briefly, of each cupboard has to have a specific kind of wood, and how they said wood has memory. And even if you look at the very front of your book, right here, it literally gives you the chart of all of the places, and it says, like, I'm pretty sure what they said 3, I'm pretty sure it's world, place, and then time. And so you can just already tell that there's obviously something magical going on, but also as the story grows, you see more magic in people. You get to meet the fairy, you get to meet the green men, which I love. You get to see how the magic and the worlds, they kind of are connected, and they have class. Like Nemeline is this very powerful queen, and then she's just like fairy who have magic, but it's so beneath her, is to build and build upon that. And knowing this whole story, I honestly forgot that, like, Dottie went through the cupboards. I honestly did not remember that. So it was very interesting for me to see that, but just knowing the whole story, it was so interesting. It was so much fun reading this book again, and I really enjoy N.D.Wilson's writing style. He makes you feel like you're dragged into this world, that this book is a cupboard, and he's dragging you into this story. And I really, really enjoyed it. He uses his 5 senses a lot, which are really good in case any of you are writers and you need help setting a scene. Using the 5 senses, smell. We usually just like focus on sight, like what do you see, but noise and smells and feelings all really help you be transported to different worlds. He has humor in his book, and he crafted this metaphor so beautiful that as Henry discovers the cupboards, he's discovering himself, and as he continues to get into, he gets more lost the more he gets to the cupboards, but in reality he's actually finding his way home, and which is what I enjoyed so much about the story. If it's not focusing on Henry discovering the cupboards, it's about himself discovering himself. He's finding out things that any boy would want to do, and this story is so much about discovery, both the cupboards and Henry, and I really enjoyed that sort of metaphor. This book is so good. It is. The elements of this book are phenomenal. It's a really good story. I honestly can't give it justice. It's middle grade, but honestly, there are so many reviews out there of parents loving this book too. And I think that's just because it does an excellent job with everything it gives you, and the story just progresses and goes farther and farther and farther, and I love this book. I'm not gonna lie, I love this book, and I want to give it 5 stars. I feel kind of odd giving the first book review I do 5 stars, and also I know that this series, it gets better. So I don't know if you can give a 5-star book even though you know the books after it get better. So I really don't know what to do. Okay, so I can't really find anything I disliked about this book, and I really want to give it 5 stars, but I will give it 4.5 because I am a coward. But go check this book out. Go to your library, get an ebook, go to Audible. I do not care. Just go find this book and read it and tell me what you think about it. Also, there is a prequel to this book, and so if you're wondering like in what order you should read these, I do suggest starting with this one and then going 2, 3, and then reading the prequel, because the prequel actually, it's very interesting what N.D.Wilson does with it. He combines multiple of his series, and so it's super interesting. So once you get into these, you can read a few other of his series and then read that one, and then you'll totally have your mind blown and love it. But if you do want to check that out, I actually have a podcast review of it that I can link in the description below. But yeah, that's all I have for you today. Go read this book. I know you'll enjoy it. If you don't, I feel sorry for you. I can't give this book justice. I hope one day I can. I hope you read it. Go read it. And make sure you like, subscribe, and comment below. It really helps me. Thank you for watching all the way through, and I'll see you next time in my Land. Bye!